This is extremely important. If you want to understand the gospel, you have to understand this. The gospel of Jesus Christ is not, ultimately, a derivative of any particular human party or category. It's not a form of liberalism. It's not a form of conservatism. But it's also nothing halfway in the middle. Yes, it's true that the Pharisees attacked Jesus because they smelled a Sadducee, and the Sadducees attacked Jesus because they smelled a Pharisee. But it wasn't because he was halfway in the middle. Let me show you why. What's the gospel? See, this rebuke of the Sadducees, this seeing that the Sadducees and the Pharisees both hated Jesus, is so important to understanding the gospel today. What's the gospel? At least this. God is a God of justice. Sin and evil have inflicted a great misery in the world, and God is a God of justice, and he can't just overlook that. He hates oppression, he hates wickedness, he hates evil. But Jesus Christ has come and satisfied God's justice. Jesus Christ has come and lived a perfect life, and he's died a death in the death that we deserve, the penalty of sin, in our place. There is a divine justice before whom we all stand, a bar of justice, and yet Jesus Christ has satisfied it so utterly that when I believe in Jesus and I rest in him, I am completely accepted on the spot by sheer grace. Now, Sadducees and Pharisees, both of that day and of this day, cannot stand the gospel. The gospel is not a form of conservatism. It's not a form of liberalism, because both the essential forms can't stand it. Why? The Sadducees did not believe there was a God of justice, didn't believe in a judgment day, didn't believe in a God who punishes, didn't believe in all that. But the Pharisees didn't believe that this God could be satisfied, but rather we had to, through our good works and our religiosity and our moral virtue, we had to do it. We had to satisfy it. And therefore Pharisees, when they listened to Jesus, thought they smelled a liberal. See? The conservatives thought they smelled a liberal, and the liberals thought they smelled a conservative. But Jesus is not halfway in the middle. You say, that's because he was the perfect middle. Oh, no, he wasn't. Listen carefully. The God of the conservatives, the Pharisees, was demanding, right? But the God of the gospel is more demanding than the God of the conservatives, because the God of the gospel has a justice that can't be satisfied by anybody but Jesus. You can't live up. Jesus, God, the biblical God, the true God, was more conservative than the conservatives' God. But, on the other hand, the Sadducees, the sort of humanistic liberal religion, says we believe in a loving God. We believe in a God who accepts everyone. We don't believe in a God of wrath and of judgment. But Jesus Christ, God, the biblical God, the true God, is more loving than the God of the Sadducees, because the biblical God offered up his Son. The biblical God suffered. The biblical God went to the cross. And therefore, on the one hand, conservatives, when they heard the gospel, thought they heard a liberal, and the liberals thought they heard a conservative, but it wasn't because he was in the middle. Because the God of Jesus was more conservative than the conservative God and more liberal than the liberal God at the same time. Now, until you see Jesus Christ rebuking both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, until you see him being attacked by both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, you might misunderstand the gospel. You might think the gospel is really a particular kind of human category, but it's not. Now, let me apply this briefly, because we have to get on and talk about the afterlife now, don't we? Okay. But let me just show you how some of the practical implications of this. If you're a Christian, get used to nobody liking you at all. Now, I know that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too much. Look, when you first become a Christian, in the beginning, when you first come to Christ, there's a tendency to accept the gospel because you think it confirms the things you've always believed. If you're a kind of liberal person, you like the gospel because it talks about, the poor and the outsider and all that kind of thing. And you say, yes, I like Christianity, I like the gospel because it's just the things I've always believed. On the other hand, if you're a conservative type, you like all that talk about moral virtue and all that talk about justice and wrath and guilt. You like that. And so you want to get into Christianity because you say, hey, I believe the gospel because it's just like the things I've always believed, but I want you to know that the more you become like Jesus, the more you actually come to grasp the gospel. It takes time, it takes years, but the more you come to understand the uniqueness of Christianity, the more you come to realize it's not like anything else. Therefore, if you really start to understand the gospel, and if you begin to, in a sense, articulate it and live it out, you're going to find, and this is what I want you to get used to, that everybody thinks you're an idiot, that everybody thinks there's something wrong with you. But conservatives do not like how the gospel talks about justice for the poor. Liberals do not like how the gospel talks about everybody's got to get converted. In Eastern Europe under communism, the church looked like a dangerously liberal institution because it was standing up for the freedom of the individual. But in the secular Western world, where we are today, the church looks like a dangerous conservative institution because it says there's something more important than your individual freedom. If you understand that the Sadducees and the Pharisees hate Jesus, and it's not because he's something in the middle, because he's something off the spectrum, you need to get ready for the fact that you're going to go all of your life with people continually misunderstanding you, constantly misunderstanding you, constantly thinking you're something that you're not. You need to get used to it. You need to get ready for it. After all, we have him in heaven forever. We have a new heavens and new earth. So don't feel too much self-pity here, but change your expectations. So if you're a Christian, get used to people misunderstanding you on all sides of the spectrum, maybe all of your life. However, by the way, here's something else. If you aren't a Christian, or you're not sure you're a Christian, or you're sort of inquiring right now, and you're exploring and you're thinking it out. That's the great thing about Redeemer. There's always people on a journey in every one of our services. Here's what I say to you about this. Make sure you take time and you really listen, and you don't too quickly jump to the conclusion that when you hear some message or some sermon or some Bible study or read some book, oh, it's just like that. If when you hear the gospel, you immediately like it, you're probably wrong. You probably like it because you think it's like something you like. If, on the other hand, you hear the gospel and you immediately hate it, you're probably wrong. You hate it because you think it's like something you hate. But the gospel's not like anything else. It's going to take time to get it. If you've got a friend who you're trying to help come to Christ, be patient. You're asking a lot. So anyway, the rebuke shows us that the gospel does not fit into any category, and you're going to be arguing with everybody. So get ready for it and be gentle about it. Jesus Christ can look right through a person's heart and talk in ways, I think, to people that I'm not sure we can. On the other hand, we have to get ready to argue with people across the spectrum, because the gospel is not just a form of one kind of human thought or another, nor something in the middle.